Welcome back to Next Gen Console Watch, our show following all the news on the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. I'm Damon Hatfield, and as always, I am joined by Jonathan Dornbush, host of IGN's PlayStation podcast, Podcast Beyond.
Beyond. Hey, Damon.
And Ryan McCaffrey, host of IGN's Xbox podcast, Podcast Unlocked.
Howdy, Damon.
Hello there, both of you. And we are deep into January. The new consoles have been out for over 2 months now. And unfortunately, it is slim pickings for new next-gen games to play on our next-gen consoles. Hitman 3 is out this week. Ryan is playing that, I'm aware, and I'm also playing it and enjoying it. But in terms of real next-gen experiences, unfortunately, some of the games we were expecting to come this year have been delayed. So we're going to run down a few of those delays that we learned about recently and also discuss some games that have been missing in action for a long time. Let's begin with the big one that was revealed last year at one of Sony's presentations. That is Hogwarts Legacy, the open world action RPG set in the Harry Potter universe. Jonathan, this game was announced for as well as next gen platforms, also for PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. This has now been delayed out of 2021 into 2022. Does that worry you that it's still planned for current gen consoles, given all the problems that we've just seen with Cyberpunk?
So Hogwarts Legacy is an interesting case, I think, because some leaked footage of it, alleged, WB has never commented on it, but this footage that we saw, I think it was now 3 years ago in 2018 or so, roughly equated to footage we saw in the actual trailer for the game. So it's been in development for quite some time. So my hope is that the developers have been keeping in mind the current gen systems all along on this. It seems, I think, maybe a little bit of a different situation than perhaps we've heard about the development of CDPR's Cyberpunk, where they were very much focused on at least from the executive level, the high end, and less so on the lower end spec consoles. But at least for me, it's not a huge concern because WB does have other games they're focusing on for both current gen and next gen. Gotham Knights, which is also supposed to come out this year, at least tentatively for now, is scheduled for a release this year, is supposed to come to both the Xbox One and PS4, as well as the PS5 and Xbox Series X. But meanwhile, Suicide Squad, all three of these games being from WB, isn't coming to the PS4 and Xbox One generation, and that is set for a release next year. Hopefully, my hope and expectation is that each of the different developments have kept in mind those goals. And so we shouldn't see, I think, too much of an issue because of this delay. But I think the further you get away from the now last gen of consoles being the standard, you will start to have more questions and want to see, I think fans will definitely want to see gameplay footage, especially after Cyberpunk, of those last gen versions before launch, before they, put money down on these games.
Ryan, how about you? Is it a concern? I know it gets confusing when you talk about next gen, current gen, last gen games. So let's just say for games that are being developed for Xbox Series X and Xbox One, are you concerned about that cross generation development, especially when games are being pushed back a year or more from now?
Not in Hogwarts Legacy's case, mostly because this is such a big license, this is such a big property for WB that I think they're going to be putting in the resources to make sure that those old gen versions are going to be up to par. Because there are 100+ million PS4s out there. There's 50+ million Xbox Ones. That's a lot of money to be made by WB with Hogwarts Legacy whenever it releases on however many platforms. But if a ton of those potential customers would be playing a really inferior version, that's not going to bode well for any potential like Hogwarts Legacy 2 or any other future Harry Potter games. So I think just in the sense that WB knows the sales potential of this being really high, I don't think they're going to allow any kind of repeat of a Cyberpunk situation, especially after the entire industry's eyes have been opened even wider to that kind of worst case scenario that we just saw play out with Cyberpunk.
Now, Ubisoft was supposed to have a 1-2 punch of games coming out in February. They're supposed to have Far Cry 6 and Riders Republic. Far Cry 6 was delayed, I don't know if I want to say indefinitely, but it wasn't given a new release date. Although it did, a listing did appear in the Microsoft store that put it at May 25th. And Jonathan, that would put it right after Deathloop, I believe. Isn't Deathloop, I want to say May 21st?
Yes, yeah.
Is Far Cry 6 a game that you have your eye on? Are you a Far Cry fan?
I mean, definitely on and off. I haven't been as into the series, I think, since the Far Cry 3 days for sure. But it's definitely an interesting one. You know, Ubisoft put out 3 major open world games in the fall, and I'm still working my way through at least 2 of them. So there's definitely no shortage of Ubisoft published open world games at the moment for me. So actually, in terms of my backlog, I'm kind of thankful that it's getting a little more time and not coming out so early in the year. But it's one of those things where I think Far Cry is really interesting because they've had success both at the very ends of years as well as in springtime. They've released, in December as well as the first half of the year. So I'm not too worried about Far Cry 6 shifting or necessarily competing with other games, especially something like Deathloop that I think has a much more stark art design to it. It's going for a little bit of a different vibe. Yes, it's a first-person game, but there's a little bit of a different, I think, focus there and sort of gameplay loop that they're going to be going for.
Now, Ryan, I know you're a big racing game fan. Riders Republic from Ubisoft is another one that was delayed into later this year. It was supposed to be February 25th. Riders Republic is, of course, not a straight. It's not a sim like a Forza or a Gran Turismo. It's a little bit more extreme, sportsy, I believe, but in vehicles. Is that something that you've been looking forward to?
I definitely was really intrigued by the premise shown off in the CG trailer. You know, that wasn't gameplay, but if they can really pull off dozens of people all like doing various things, some together, some not, down the same mountain slope at the same time, then that could be really, really interesting to see. So I'm definitely eager to see more on that and curious how the final game turns out.
Now, Ryan, if we're talking about next-gen game delays, we have to at least mention Halo Infinite. It's a game that we've talked about a lot. It was supposed to be the killer app for the Xbox Series X at launch, delayed a little shortly before launch into fall of 2021. Certainly need to include it among this list of delayed next-gen games coming fall 2021. Is it something? What's your sort of level of excitement for Halo Infinite these days?
I think it's going to be November 15th. That's the 20th anniversary of Halo. I'm comforted by the fact that they are taking that long. I mean, again, you can dig into how were they possibly going to ship it in November of 2020 if they're now delaying it to fall of 2021. Yes, I understand there's a whole conversation to be had there, but there's nothing we can do about that. What we have in front of us is Halo Infinite will be the first mainline Halo release in what will now be 6 years between mainline Halos. This is a spiritual reboot of Halo, even though it is Halo 6 story-wise. So there's a lot riding on it. And I am eager to learn more to see what the game ends up being after their obviously very negatively consequential gameplay unveil at the Xbox showcase back in July.
I remember it well. Jonathan, Outriders was recently delayed to April 1st, and that's not a joke. That's the actual new release date. And I actually saw in our article reporting on the delay, I saw a lot of people were bummed about that because it's a co-op shooter, and I think a lot of people have been looking for something new to play with their friends out there. So what's your sort of like take on Outriders?
Yeah, I think it's good that we're going to be getting a demo in February to sort of replace that launch window. And I think that'll at least give us a better sense of what Outriders will be as a multiplayer experience. You know, I think this is one that definitely it's not the same developers, but it is published by Square Enix. And after the troubled launch that Marvel's Avengers faced as a co-op multiplayer experience, especially a really big marquee one, I think Outriders, especially not being related to any sort of IP, but still, a big project for People Can Fly and Square as a publisher, I think they want to make sure they get it right at launch. And so taking the time to make sure it is crafted correct for April 1st, if they get a lot of feedback from that demo in February, I wouldn't be surprised if we even see either a shorter or longer delay just to, take all of that stuff into account as well. But I do think this is a good move, especially given the sort of pattern of releases of multiplayer online co-op games that haven't always come out great at launch. It's nice that they're continuing to push it to take the time to make sure, hopefully it is right at launch.
Mm-hmm. And finally, for games that were recently delayed, there's Capcom's Pragmata. I believe it was a Sony presentation during CES that quietly shifted that game's release from 2022 to 2023. So that one's a long ways off. Jonathan, is that one that was revealed at a Sony conference or presentation last year?
Yes, that was in one of the PS5 showcases last year. And then as now has become sort of a de facto place to look for Sony release dates at the end of Sony sort of buzz trailers where they put everything together, there was a little bit of text mentioning that delay. But that right now with that game, we have only a CGI trailer and a couple screenshots, so it's not one that I was even kind of in my periphery of thinking. So if it needs to move to 2023, let it take its time. That's fine with me.
Okay, let's cover off on some games that have been missing in action for a long time. Not necessarily recently delayed, but it's like, where are these games? Are they ever coming out? Games like Beyond Good and Evil 2, a game which I know Ryan has some opinions on whether or not that game will ever see the light of day.
I just don't. I think that game was such a sort of cult classic moonshot before when it. I mean, how many E3s ago was that announced? 3?
Ooh, I want to say at least 3, probably.
Or at least, so it's maybe been at least 2.5 years because we're here in January. So it's been a while already. There hasn't been anything else on it. And Michel Ancel, the creator, retired. He's done. He's out. So I would bet lunch with anybody. I don't think that game's ever coming out. I hope I'm wrong. I mean, it'd be cool to see it. It's such a Beyond Good and Evil's a beloved kind of cult classic, and it'd be cool to see it come back. But I think the odds, given how silent it's been since that announcement from Ubisoft, and the fact that Michel Ancel is now retired, I am not optimistic that that game will ever be something that you play on your PC or console.
Whatever it's worth, last September in an official blog post, Ubisoft said, "We are aiming to show more and show you the game in action sometime next year once we pass our next internal production milestones." So,
well, good.
Ubisoft has a few of these. There's also Skull and Bones. That one I feel even less confident about ever coming out, I think. What about Dying Light 2? That's one that was supposed to be out last year, I believe. We saw it at E3 2 E3s ago, and we felt very positive about it. And then the game was sort of quietly delayed, and we haven't gotten any updates since. I think on Twitter, Techland recently said, the developer Techland said, updates are coming in the new year. Now we're in the new year. I don't know. Jonathan, how are you feeling about Dying Light 2?
Yeah, the E3 reveal of Dying Light 2, I think a couple years back, I guess it was 2019 now, I still forget we're in 2021, was actually one of my favorite demos at E3 that year. I thought it was a really impressive and promising showcase, especially with the idea that that's a game where the story choices you make will drastically affect what parts of the world you see in any given playthrough. And that's a very ambitious idea and an interesting one to see whether or not it will be fun when put into practice if you're, not seeing entire parts of this meticulously crafted world while playing, unless you play through twice. But, it's one of those ones. Techland, I think, sort of has a lot of stuff going on. There have been other Dying Light updates for the original game, I believe. So it's not as if that franchise is dead, and I apologize for the pun there. But it's definitely something I think they are focusing on. But I do wonder if it's one of those things where the ambitions and promise that they showed off originally and now then putting it into practice and development were just causing some difficulties. And so they've kind of had to hunker down and focus on really proving what they said they were going to do.
There's another zombie game that has never officially been canceled, but has been passed along through to 3 different developers now. That's Dead Island 2. Ryan, that's one that I think I'm willing to make a bet is never coming out.
Yeah, it's... I think you'd be more likely to win that bet than I would be mine. But yeah, it's that's if it's really still in development, in active development, you kind of, I'm not a publisher, but I would kind of start to wonder, why are you continuing to spend the money on that? Could you possibly return the investment? Are they just trying to think of it as, okay, if we can get this done, we can keep this, we can turn this into a franchise, and then maybe Dead Island 3, we could make our money back. I don't know what the thinking is there, but that one's definitely probably the biggest head scratcher of all of these MIA games.
Yeah. And finally, there's Biomutant, a game a lot of gamers are excited about. And that's one that I feel the most confident about. I wouldn't call that as being stuck in development hell or anything. We saw it last year. It was part of IGN's Summer of Gaming event. And the developer said, many of you are wondering if the game is still in development. Let us assure you that we've never been working harder and more focused on it than now. I think they've just been heads down working on that game. And hopefully that game will be out this year. I don't know. We'll see. Okay, before we go this week, we have the results of last week's poll. We asked, what would make you want to upgrade to an 8K TV? And the winning result was affordable price. Not too surprising. 54% of you said, if I could afford it, I'll probably want to upgrade. Way down at the bottom was available video content. Only 17% are worried about that, which is a good thing because it's going to be a little while before we've got a lot of 8K available video content. As for our poll this week, we want to know which of these MIA games we've been discussing do you think we'll see first this year? Could it be Biomutant, Beyond Good and Evil 2, Dying Light 2, or Dead Island 2? Spoilers, I don't think it's going to be the last one. Make sure to vote at IGN.com. We will share the results with you next week. And that will about do it for this edition of Next Gen Console Watch. Thank you to both Ryan and Jonathan. We'll be back next Friday, 6 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Eastern with more news on the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. We'll see you then.